I was driving home from a friend's house late at night when it happened. One moment I was cruising down the deserted road. The next my car was spinning out of control. I couldn't tell you what caused the accident. It all happened so fast. All I remember is the blinding headlights of an oncoming car, and then everything went black. When I came to, I was still in my car, but it was completely totaled. My head was throbbing and I could feel the warm trickle of blood down the side of my face. I tried to open the door, but it was jammed shut. Panic set in as I frantically searched for a way out. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper in my ear. "Are you afraid?" I whipped around, heart racing, but there was no one there, just the stillness of the night air. Shaking off the fear, I tried the door again, and this time it gave way. I stumbled out of the wreckage and into the darkness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. As I walked down the empty road, I noticed a figure in the distance. It was a woman, standing still as a statue. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. As I got closer, I saw the dark circles under her eyes and the bloody gash on her forehead. She was the driver of the other car. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She just stared at me, her eyes hollow and lifeless. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing is ever okay now." I backed away, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. That's when I noticed the car. It was like a mirage in the darkness, a twisted mass of metal and glass. I could see the silhouette of a person slumped over the wheel. I don't know what possessed me to investigate, but I couldn't just leave someone there to die. As I got closer, I realized that the person in the car was me. My body was mangled and broken, blood pooling around me. I woke up in the hospital, grateful to be alive, but haunted by the memories of the accident. It wasn't until weeks later that I found out the truth. The woman I had seen on the road was a victim of the same accident, a ghost doomed to relive her final moments over and over again. And as for me, well, I had narrowly escaped death, but something tells me I wasn't supposed to.
About a year ago, when I passed my license, I was looking for a car. I considered up to 1,000,000 options. The search lasted about a week, but then I saw the ideal offer. The car was a couple of years old, had hundreds of miles, checked. The only thing was that it had been in an accident several times, but the price was only $850,000, despite the fact that it is sold for several million. At first I was surprised myself. I thought it was assembled from spare parts of other cars, but no. We made an appointment and came with a friend. He worked as a mechanic, so he had experience in these matters. The accidents were not significant, and the bumper and fenders were replaced almost immediately. The car was in perfect condition. They sold it cheap because they urgently needed to sell it. Like a stupid child, I believed it, and a few days later, I bought a car. The first few weeks, the car simply surprised me. It worked well on the road, had minimal fuel consumption. Strashno.com never found any breakdowns, and there were enough horses. Literally, a month later, I began to notice strange things. When I arrive in the morning, I look at the panel and see that the tank is empty. Although from the evening there were still 10 liters left, I was just getting ready to refuel the next day. Strange, most likely the local punks leaked it. I didn't see it at night. The alarm did not go off. Apparently, they already had experience in these matters. In general, I gave up and went to work on the subway. In the evening when I returned, I called the same mechanic friend. He asked me to bring a canister, since I didn't have one myself. He even offered money, but he refused and said that he would bring it for free. I was in his debt. We filled up for 5 liters, then said goodbye, and I rushed to the gas station. Already on the road, I felt something was wrong. I tried to increase the speed, but the miracle machine seemed not to obey. No higher than 60, yes, strashno.com, and that's it. I looked at the cruise control. It was off. Strange. But after a few minutes, everything returned to normal, and she flew forward as if scalded, although I didn't really press on the gas. It became uneasy here, I thought, just not to fly into a ditch or under a truck. I hobbled to the gas station somehow. I decided to fill it up, drive home, and take it to a car service center tomorrow on my day off. I filled up half a tank and got home normally. The next day, at about noon, I left the entrance, but to my surprise, the car was not there. Stolen, not otherwise. No one had the keys. What a shame. I bought a new car, and then this happens. I went to the police, filed a report of theft, presented documents, and they said, "Wait, we'll look for it." They checked the cameras and found nothing. All day I racked my brains and regretted that Strashno.com. I didn't buy a garage when I had extra money. Somehow I managed to fall asleep and woke up in the morning because of the alarm. I ran to the window and there was a white Mercedes, the same as mine. The numbers are the same. How? Where? These questions flashed through my head. I went out and looked at the car. The keys fit. I stood there in bewilderment. Maybe some surprise from friends? Hardly. I returned to the station, already in the car. By the way, the tank was almost empty again. 3 liters remained. He took the statement and told about what happened. Perhaps the hijacker borrowed it for a couple of days. I installed a new alarm system, security, and special locks. Everything seems to be fine. A month later, when I got into the car, it was very unusual, since I haven't driven it since I went to the police station. During this time, a putrid and rotten smell appeared in the car. Very nasty. Perhaps food from the previous owner, Strashno.com, or maybe some animal jumped into the open door while I was turning away and is now decomposing in the back seat. But after completely searching the interior and trunk, I still couldn't find the source of the smell. I tried to start the car and take it for a drive after a long absence. But as soon as we got on the highway, the steering wheel suddenly began to turn on its own, now to the left, now to the right. I stopped on the side of the road and remembered that I hadn't filled the tank since last time, and at that time I had a couple of liters left. But now, there are all cubes on the dashboard. What the hell is this? I called a tow truck and took the car to the service station. I went through a full check but didn't find a single fault. I found the number of the former owner and tried to call, but he didn't pick up. Expected. I don't know what it was, but I didn't want to drive this car anymore and decided to sell it to immediately. It was easy to sell for $1 million, and besides, it was $100,000 in profit. By the way, the smell also mysteriously disappeared. A buyer was found very quickly, and the inspection went just perfectly. We even drove it for several kilometers, but the car felt like new. Very strange, I thought, but I frankly didn't care as long as I sold this damn car. The purchase was just as successful, but a couple of months later I read on the internet that this car crashed on the ring road. The driver was burned alive. The car is trash. Showed a photo. The rooms are still the same. Yes, and the first name and last name coincided. For some reason I remembered them perfectly. Thank God I sold it, I thought. And now, dear readers, I am sitting in the kitchen and writing this mystical story from life. It's 3 a.m. and a mysterious Mercedes with the same numbers again stands in the place where I parked it earlier. Although I saw photographs where all that was left of it was a pile of metal. Mysticism or irony of fate. There are many strange things in life, and not all of us believe in ghost stories. But this happens up to a certain point. Such a moment came in my life when I was 17 years old. Now I'm over 30, but I remember that story in detail. This was the year I graduated from high school and took the college entrance exam. Life seemed like a fairy tale, and ahead was a summer free from lessons and lectures. That summer I came to visit my relatives in a small town, and I immediately found myself at a sad event. Wake. A young guy, a friend of Michael's cousin, died. The deceased's name was John. Michael and John were officers. They went through what is called fire and water together. Igor had a family and lived in that same town, while John was single and came to visit a friend. He came and stayed to stay, and then one fateful day he was offered a car. Moreover, they asked for sheer nonsense for it, but they gave it away very inexpensively, and John agreed, bought. Michael tried to dissuade him from this purchase, telling him that this car was unlucky, that it had been in accidents more than once, and that he should stay away from it. But John didn't listen to anyone. He didn't have to ride the iron executioner for very long. 2 months later, he had an accident and died. What happened to Michael is beyond words. He literally cried as he told me that he could not convince his friend and allowed himself to buy misfortune. We sat in the yard after the wake, and Michael talked and said that now he doesn't know what to do with this piece of iron, that there is no person, but it looks quite decent, that he's afraid to sell it to other people, knowing that it's not a car, but misfortune. Michael thought and decided that he would not rush, but would leave it in his garage for now. We left the yard, went up to the apartment, and began to get ready for bed. A lamp was burning in the hall. There was a portrait of John, next to a glass of whiskey, covered with a piece of bread. I wished everyone good night and went to the bedroom. She lay down and closed her eyes. I don't know how long I lay there, but I started to fall asleep. Suddenly the door opens and someone comes in. I decided not to open my eyes. I didn't really want to start a conversation, because I was tired all day and wanted to fall asleep quickly. At first I thought it was Michael's wife who decided to take something from the closet. They made a bed for themselves in the living room, and I, as a guest, were given a place in the bedroom. But the newcomer walked across the room and sank into a chair near my head. I didn't hear a creak. I just felt that the person was nearby. I didn't open my eyes. I couldn't say that I felt uncomfortable being in this apartment where the lamp was burning, because I didn't even think about things like fears in the dark and so on. And then the room was dimly lit. I didn't want to be in a strange place in pitch darkness. I might run into something. So, I hear and feel that a person is sitting and not moving. At that moment, I was tormented by only one question. Who is it? Why did you come in? Michael. And will we have to talk to him again about the deceased? I did not want. About 3 minutes passed. I was lying with my eyes closed. Someone was sitting next to me. I began to smile and realized that I had lost the game of silence. And saying, "Well," she opened her eyes. What a shock I felt, I cannot describe to you. The person sitting in the chair was still in place, but the chair was empty. I was so scared that I jumped out of bed and rushed into the hall. That night I slept in a room with everyone. Michael's wife told me a few things this morning. That Sergei lived in the bedroom, and that she more than once felt his presence in the apartment. He stands behind me and breathes. I feel his presence. I didn't stay with them another night and spent the rest of my vacation there with another family, meeting them only during the day. 2 years have passed. All this time, the ill-fated car, which took the life of John, an officer who survived in hot spots and so soon found his death in civilian life, continued to be in Igor's garage. I occasionally talked with Igor's mother, and this is what she began to tell me. Michael again missed his friend. He seems to be dreaming about him and saying, "My car is still standing motionless." He began to think about how to fix it for someone sell it, maybe even for scrap metal. No sooner said than done. The car was repaired. And suddenly, Michael unexpectedly announced to everyone, "I will not sell it. I'll ride it myself." All this is nonsense and prejudice. Iron is controlled by man, not the devil. I'll be careful and won't even scratch it while driving. How his mother and wife tried to dissuade him, but Igor didn't listen to anyone. John would be glad to know that we could use his car. After talking with Michael's mother, he felt uneasy. But nothing can be done. Although we tried to convince him, we couldn't. Several months have passed. I lived in my city. They lived in theirs. Although they communicated rarely, they knew about the events taking place in each other's lives. One night I had a dream. I saw myself in bed. I was covered with a blanket and suddenly I felt that my legs were hurting, so much so that I woke up from the pain. I feel my legs are burning. Awoke, I look, and right in front of my bed, a man is standing near my feet, slightly hunched over. Michael! The thought burned through. Where is he here at night? But I didn't think about anything. The pain in my legs was so severe that I tore the blanket off them and knew exactly what I would see now. My legs were lying in a fire and burning alive. I tore off the blanket, sat up and looked at my feet. Nothing. No fire. The pain is gone. I fell onto the pillow. What happiness. This is just a dream. After lying there for a second, I came to my senses. Michael. He's standing there. I opened my eyes and there's no one there. I began to shake. I grabbed a blanket and a pillow and went into my sister's room, woke her up and lay down with her. Tormented by thoughts and a little afraid, I fell asleep. The next day we received a message on WhatsApp. Brother Michael died. The funeral is the day after tomorrow. He was driving along the highway during the day and overturned. He died at night in the hospital, that night when my legs were burning and he stood next to my bed. I never thought it would happen to me. I always thought I was a safe driver, always paying attention to the road and my surroundings. But that all changed on a dark and stormy night. I was driving home from work, exhausted after a long day. The rain was coming down in sheets, making it difficult to see. I had my windshield wipers on full blast, but they weren't doing much to clear my view. Suddenly, I saw headlights coming towards me, swerving in and out of their lane. I braced myself for impact, but it was too late. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed with a broken leg and a concussion. The doctors told me that I was lucky to be alive, that the car accident could have been much worse, but all I could think about was the other driver and what had caused them to swerve into my lane. As the days passed, I became more and more obsessed with finding out what had happened that night. I scoured the news and police reports, but there was no mention of the accident. It was as if it had never happened. One night, I was lying in bed when I heard a strange noise outside. It sounded like someone was creeping around my car. I got up and cautiously made my way to the window, peering out into the darkness. That's when I saw it. A figure was standing next to my car, their face obscured by the hood of their jacket. They were holding something in their hand, something that glinted in the moonlight. My heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, but the figure was already gone. They found no evidence of a break-in or attempted theft, but I knew what I had seen. It was the other driver, the one who had caused the accident. They were coming for me, coming to silence me and keep me from discovering the truth. I never did find out what really happened that night, but I know that the car accident was not just a random event. There was something sinister behind it, something that still haunts me to this day. I never believed in ghosts until the night of my car accident. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night where you feel like you're driving through a black hole. I was on my way home from a late-night shift at work when I saw a figure in the middle of the road. I swerved to avoid hitting them, but lost control of my car and crashed into a tree. When I came to, I was lying in my hospital bed with a broken arm and leg. The doctors told me that I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't feel lucky. I felt haunted. The figure I saw on the road that night wasn't a person, it was a ghost. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find my hospital room door open, even though I knew I had closed it before I went to sleep. I heard footsteps in the hallway, but when I looked outside my room, there was no one there. And then there were the nightmares. Every night I dreamt of the accident. But in my dreams, the figure on the road was no longer a ghost. It was me. I was the one lying in the middle of the road, and no matter how hard I tried to get up, I couldn't move. And then I would wake up, sweating and shaking. One day, a nurse came into my room and told me that she had something to show me. She took me to the hospital's security office and showed me the footage from the night of my accident. I watched as my car swerved to avoid hitting a figure in the middle of the road and then crashed into a tree. But as I watched the footage, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. The figure on the road wasn't a ghost, it was me. I had been so exhausted from working long hours that I must have fallen asleep at the wheel. I had hallucinated the figure on the road and swerved to avoid it, causing the accident. But why did I keep seeing the figure as a ghost? Was it my guilty conscience, or was something more sinister at work? As I lay in my hospital bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the accident had opened up a portal to the other side, that my near-death experience had given me a glimpse into the world of the dead. And when I finally left the hospital, I knew that I would never be the same. I never thought it could happen to me. I always drove cautiously, never exceeding the speed limit or texting while driving. But one day, on my way home from work, it happened. A drunk driver swerved into my lane and I had no time to react. The impact was like nothing I had ever experienced. Glass shattered, metal crumpled, and my body was thrown around like a rag doll. I remember the screeching of tires, the blaring of horns, and the sickening crunch of metal on metal, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and white-coated doctors. My head was throbbing, my body ached, and I could barely move. I tried to speak, but my voice was hoarse and weak. The doctors told me that I had been in a serious car accident. The other driver had died on impact, and I had been lucky to survive. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt traumatized, overwhelmed by the thought that I could have died. As I lay there in the hospital bed, I began to relive the accident over and over again in my mind. The way the other car had come out of nowhere, swerving into my lane like a deadly missile. The way my car had spun out of control, crashing into the guardrail and flipping over. The way the world had turned upside down and I had been plunged into a nightmare. But the worst part was the guilt. The guilt of surviving while the other driver had perished. The guilt of wondering if I could have done anything differently to prevent the accident. The guilt of knowing that my life would never be the same again. I spent weeks in the hospital, undergoing surgeries and physical therapy. I had broken bones, internal injuries, and a severe concussion. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional trauma. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and felt like I was drowning in a sea of darkness. But eventually, with the help of therapy and supportive friends and family, I began to heal. I learned to accept that the accident was not my fault, that I had done everything I could to avoid it. I learned to appreciate life more, to cherish every moment, and to never take anything for granted. And yet, even now, years later, I still remember the crash vividly. It haunts me in my dreams, in random moments of fear and panic, and in the way I drive, always cautious, always mindful of the fragility of life. Car accidents are terrifying, unpredictable, and life-changing. I never thought I'd be that person, the person who caused a car accident. But there I was, sitting in my car with a dented hood and shattered windshield. The other car involved in the accident had already been towed away, and the police officer was taking my statement. I knew I was in trouble. I had been driving home from a late shift at work, tired and unfocused. I was only a few blocks away from my apartment when I saw the headlights of the other car coming towards me. I couldn't tell if they were in their lane or not, and before I knew it, we collided. The sound of metal crunching and glass shattering was deafening. I remember my ears ringing as I stumbled out of my car and saw the other driver lying on the ground, blood pooling around his head. I felt sick to my stomach, knowing that I had caused this. The next few days were a blur. I was arrested and charged with reckless driving, and the other driver was in a coma. I couldn't sleep or eat, haunted by the image of his lifeless body lying on the pavement. It wasn't until a few weeks later, when I received a letter in the mail, that things really started to get creepy. The letter was typed, with no return address. It read, "I know what you did. I know you caused the accident, and I won't stop until you pay for it." I was terrified. I didn't know who could have sent me this letter, or what they were capable of. I started seeing shadows outside my apartment window and hearing strange noises in the middle of the night. I knew I had to do something to protect myself. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. He found out that the other driver had a history of criminal activity and was actually involved in a local gang. The letter was likely a scare tactic to get me to pay for his medical bills and avoid any legal repercussions. I was relieved to know that I wasn't being stalked by some vengeful ghost, but the experience had left me shaken. I realized that my actions could have consequences far beyond a simple car accident. From that day on, I vowed to always be more careful and responsible on the road.